disproportionately suffered because of no matches. There's when they regularize their status, the information is not updated in the databases, and a lot of times employers will take the path of least resistance, and they will not hire somebody because they think that they're maybe not have the proper documentation to work here. And so those cases were they were argued before the U.S. Supreme Court in the fall, and we expect a decision in June. So although we've seen an increase in the past 6 years, we went from litigating 6 cases, we're now litigating 22 cases here in Arizona alone. But a lot of times, if I could avoid going to court, it's much less expensive, and a lot of times it's much quicker to try to resolve many of these issues outside of the courtroom. And we have found that this has been particularly effective in the context of students' rights, for example. A lot of times a demand letter from the ACLU to a school district will have a very positive outcome and much faster results and a much faster time frame. I'll give you an example. When the Dysart School District did not take appropriate steps to protect a 15-year-old gay student from discrimination and harassment, we ended up sending a letter to the school district, and they ultimately ended up changing the entire district-wide policy with regard to bullying of LGBT students. And so they added sexual orientation to one of the protected categories. And so I think this is really important. We were able to do this without litigation, and it was really an important outcome that we saw. And we've seen that in other cases. In Yuma, for example, in the GSAs, a lot of the school officials did not want to allow gay students to form gay-straight alliances, and they wanted the students to get parental permission in order to participate in the clubs, and so we sent a demand letter. And ultimately, this year is actually a 2-year anniversary of the creation of the first GSA at the Yuma High School. So, again, many times one letter can have a tremendous impact on many students in schools and in other areas. For example, we have seen what I think is, and I think Peggy talked to me a little bit about this before we started, but we have seen a dramatic increase in Arizona's prison population in recent years. We are at the top of the list in terms of incarceration rates for the Western United States. What is unique about Arizona is that while most states, including conservative states like Texas, Mississippi, South Carolina, have been using these sort of fiscal crisis to take a hard look at reducing the number of people behind bars and doing it in a cost-efficient way and doing it in a way that does not have an impact on public safety, Arizona is going in the completely opposite direction. The governor's budget this year proposed a 10% increase in the Department of Corrections budget. While we're slashing university and college education funding, we are increasing the DOC budget. And so we are clearly not thinking about how to sustain this prison growth, this addiction that we've had to incarcerating people behind bars. The majority of the people that are behind bars are there for nonviolent offenses. Many are addicted to drugs. And so we've been looking at, recently, over the past couple of years, we've launched several projects to kind of look at the conditions of confinement for populations, particularly vulnerable populations in these prison facilities, the mentally ill, women in particular, and have found that in Arizona, the number of women admitted to state prisons has increased 60% in the last 6 years, twice the rate of increase for male admissions. Prison litigation it's costly, it's very difficult, and again, oftentimes it takes decades to resolve. And so again, we have been resorting to advocacy, non-litigation advocacy, demand letters from our attorneys to try to improve these conditions. And I'll give you an example. Pinal County Jail, we had on a regular basis started receiving letters from women who were incarcerated and immigrant women who were detained in Pinal County Jail. These are women who were there for non-violent, non-criminal administrative immigration violations, which means under federal law they're not supposed to be placed in punitive conditions, but they were placed alongside criminals. They were being denied basic health care, denied feminine hygiene products, denied access to recreational services, And a letter from us to ICE resulted in really a transfer of all the women to another facility, a much less softer facility. Obviously, we would have wanted them to be released, but again, this is an alternative that really ended up improving those conditions for these women. Pregnant women are especially vulnerable. From 2008 to 2009, incarcerated women went into labor at least 233 times in custody of our prison and jail facilities in Maricopa, Pinal, and Pima County. And these women are being routinely shackled during transportation, labor, and delivery. And we launched a women's jail project shortly after 2008, after we got reports. We started receiving reports that Arpaio was shackling pregnant women, not just during transportation, but during labor and delivery. And we decided to file records requests. And so we filed records requests for Maricopa County and all of the counties, in about 6-7 counties in the state, the largest counties. And Arpaio, instead of actually responding to the records requests, he issues a directive to his transportation security officers, excuse me, saying that in order to protect mother and baby, we will no longer shackle pregnant inmates during labor if they receive an epidural. And now, clearly, this falls short of international law, falls short of federal law. I mean, we do not believe that pregnant women should be shackled. The Department of Corrections actually has a great policy that prohibits pregnant women from being shackled. And so I think that one of the result is that now we have introduced a bill at the legislature that has been receiving bipartisan support to ban the practice of shackling women during labor. Excuse me, and there are lots of other states about 6-7 states that actually have laws banning the shackling of pregnant women. And so I think these are just some examples, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the work we've been doing at the federal level. But these are the issues that the ACLU is working on: education reform, not just improving prison conditions, but then starting to work with coalition partners, strange bedfellows, members of both the right and the left, to look at sentencing reform, and then really look at how we can reduce the number of people behind bars, both in Arizona and nationwide. Because I think what we're seeing is when we're starting to see an increase in funding for corrections rather than an increase in funding for education, we're definitely moving as a state, as a country, in the wrong direction. So before I close, I just want to give you probably some more depressing news. In terms of the House of Representatives, you may have heard that the House of Representatives is considering a continuing resolution that would fund the government through the end of this fiscal year for 2011. But as part of that continuing resolution, they're introducing many, many amendments that will really wreak havoc on civil liberties. The bill includes a number of provisions that threaten a variety of ACLU priorities, from banning all transfers of Guantanamo detainees to the United States. We have been lobbying in Washington for the closure of Guantanamo, to transfer these detainees, the remaining detainees, to facilities here in the United States. The bill also makes it difficult to resettle or repatriate detainees in other countries, and eliminates all funding for Title X family planning programs. And it's problematic, and I think the bill is moving very, very quickly. And just a couple of other things. It will it'll ban the receipt of federal funds by Planned Parenthood, deny all federal funds to all syringe exchange programs that save lives by providing clean needles that are free of HIV and hepatitis, bans the use of federal funds by the FCC to implement its new open internet rules, blocks state from expanding their Medicaid programs for family planning services, prevents the withdrawal of Bush-era HHS rules that allows healthcare workers to refuse to provide basic healthcare or even information about basic healthcare if they have a personal objection. And so I think that's the bad news. The good news is that there's some amendments that are good, including one that was offered to reinstate the Title X family planning, and an amendment that has been filed to end the invasive body scanners at the airports. And there is one final amendment that has been introduced to exempt the library circulation records, library patron list, book sales, and book customer list from Section 215 of the Patriot Act. On Monday, the Senate actually, both the Senate and the House have expanded the Patriot Act, the USA Patriot Act, for the next 3 months. And so this debate will again resurface in 3 months at the federal level. As you all know, the Patriot Act was passed shortly after 9/11, and it is a huge piece of legislation, hundreds and hundreds of sections, and we challenged some portions of those, including the portion that gives government the ability to access medical records, library records, business records, if it's relevant to an investigation. So that's what's going on at the federal level, and we have offices in Washington and New York and in every state in the country, and I think that's really, really important to reiterate, and that the importance of having an on-the-ground presence in places like Arizona, and having strong resources in places like Arizona to be able to fight these horrific public policies. And that's what we've been doing. We've been really, over the past 5 years, been working to hire more litigators and build our capacity to be able to respond to these threats and really impact the landscape of civil liberties in the long term. We have gone from 4 staff attorneys, 5 full-time staff members in 2006 to 9 full-time staff members now here in Arizona. As I mentioned, we have our first full-time lobbyist, which is a first for our organization. In the past 50 years, we have never had a full-time lobbyist down there. It's actually something that's usually handled by volunteers or myself. And so I think we're in a much better position than we were 5-6 years ago to really tackle these threats that are coming much faster, much harder every single day, as you heard Steve talk about some of these horrific pieces of legislation. And so if you believe, I just want to end by closing, and then I'll be happy to take questions. I would really urge all of you to consider becoming a member of the ACLU. Our work is based off of the contributions, the membership contributions, and the financial contributions of our supporters. Our work at the legislature is funded by our membership dues. And I would, if you believe in the importance of standing up for the fundamental rights that are entitled to everyone in this country, then I would encourage you to become a member. We've got some, I brought some bribes for everyone. If you become a member today, you can get, we've got little pocket constitutions that we are giving out. And so,
we're already a member, can we get one?
Sure, I'll throw you out.
You would get your own pocket constitution.
Right.
So you can feel right at home with Tea Partiers.
I know, it's kind of like become a bad word now. I mean, they're, but you know, again, this is Tea Party. It's a phenomenon, of the past couple of years, and they've done a great job of raising lots and lots of money, using the Constitution as their to promote their agenda. The ACLU has been around since the 1920s. We are not a fly-by-night organization. We have an organization that has been building its capacity, that has been really fundamentally changing the landscape of civil liberties in Arizona and across the country for the past 90 years. So please consider joining me, and I look forward to answering any questions.
I'll just let you take the questions from up there.
Sure,
so
great.
If folks have questions, raise your hand.
Yes.
Alexandra has lots of time to discuss.
I had heard that Russell Pierce had the governor's ear in he wants to privatize all the prisons in Arizona. I guess right now we've only got a few.
Right. 2 out of the 10.
And don't you think that that's got something to do with why we're increasing our prison population instead of decreasing?
Right. Well, I think there's been a lot reported about the connections between the current administration and the private prison industry, including several of the sort of senior Brewer officials who have strong connections to CCA, which is operating the state-run facilities and a couple of the ICE facilities. And I think you're right. I mean, I think we've got to fill up these prisons. I mean, we have the Department of Corrections is now soliciting bids to privatize the delivery of medical care in the Department of Corrections. And I think the difficulty that they've been